Hello everyone, welcome to Learning with Reese. This is the second video in our Python series. This one is going to be taking a look and introducing us to working with decision-making structures, that is, the if statement. So, today I'm going to be going and building in Online GDB. That is a website right up here. It shows you Online GDB. Before I start though, I need to go and select the language that I'm going to program in. So here I'm going to go and select in Python. And it puts in default code of hello world. I'm just going to go get rid of that. Actually, I'll get rid of all this, and I'll be ready to start my program. So, the first thing that I'm going to do in my program is I am going to go and compare two numbers to determine which is the largest number. So, I'm going to do a print statement, and I'm going to output to the user and tell them what this program is about. Welcome to our program. Print. This program will determine which number is larger between two numbers. So I'm going to go and declare two variables to hold numbers. So I'm going to put in a comment here of declarations. I'm going to declare my first number, so number 1 equals, I'm going to choose the number 8. I'm not sure what it did there. And number 2, I'm going to say is equal to 6. So we can tell right away that 8 is larger than 6, but we have to write the code to figure that out. I'm going to go and output the two numbers to the user. The two numbers that we are comparing are, I'll output my first number, number 1, and number 2. I'm just going to test it out to see what the output looks like, make sure everything's going okay. And you can see right here it says, welcome to our program. Program determine which number is larger between two numbers. The two numbers that we are comparing are 8 and 6. And now what we want to do is we want to say which is the larger number. So we are going to do that. I'll put in another comment. Use if statement to determine which variable is larger. So how an if statement works is we need to phrase it as a mathematical comparison. So we can compare two things to determine if our statement is true. Or we can do it for any type of statement and determine is that statement true or is it false. If the statement is true, then some code or something will happen. So this is how I'm going to write it up. If number 1 is larger than, which would be the greater than symbol, because remember Pac-Man always eats the larger number, number 2, colon. So if this statement is true, I go to the next line and it indents, whatever happens in the indented code will occur if that statement is true. So I'm going to print, and I'm going to say that number 1 is larger than number 2. And I don't need these extra spaces right here. So we'll test it out. I'll hit run. And it shows me right here that 8 is larger than 6. Great. But what happens if I go back and I change my code, so instead of being 8 and 6, it is 8 and 16? I run my code. 8 is not larger than 16. It doesn't tell me anything. So I need to have some code in there that's going to look to see what happens when number 2 is greater than number 1. Now, 2 cannot be greater than 1 at the same time that 1 is greater than 2. They are not independent of each other. They are dependent upon each other. One or the other is a statement. So to do that, I tab back, so I go all the way over. So only this code runs if statement is true. and I'm going to put in an else if. We type it in as elif. What this means is if our first statement right here is not true, check to see if our next statement is true. Number 1 less than number 2. So if our first statement of number 1 is larger than number 2 is not true, this code will run. Well, what do we want to do? Well, now we want to go and say that print number 1, comma, is smaller than number 2. I'll test it out. Well, here I can see it shows me that 8 is smaller than 16. If I go back, if I do this back to 8 and 6, it tells me that 8 is larger than 6. So it's working. Great. What happens, though, if we have 8 and 8? Well, 1 is not larger than 2, and 2 is not larger than 1. They're equal to each other. So I need to have one last statement if they're both equal. So I could go here and do elif number 1 is equal to number 2, but if number 1 is not greater than number 2 and number 1 is not less than number 2, the only thing that is left is that they're equal. If there's only one possible thing left, I can just use a statement that says else. Else happens if the other statements aren't true. So in this case, what I want to say that number 1 is equal to number 2. I test it out, and it works. Perfect. That's how an if statements work. Now, I'm going to go back and change up my program and add to it a little bit, and I want to make it so that the user can type in the numbers. But I'm only going to do it for one number. I'm not going to do it for both, between two numbers. So I'm going to say that print you please enter a number that we will compare to our own number. But I'm going to do that down here. And the reason that I'm going to do it down there is I'm going to tell the user what our program number is. The number that you will be comparing to is number 2. And I'm going to set number 2 to 25. And number 1, by default, I'll put to 0. So I'm going to ask them to enter a number. Input. Well, first off, I need to say, where am I going to store it? So number 1 equals input. Please enter your number. And now I can compare it. But I'm going to run it, and I'm going to see I have one problem. I run it. It says, please enter your number. I want to type in 8. It says the two numbers we are comparing are 8 and 25. And then it tells me unorderable types, string greater than integer. So what's happening here is when I bring in my number, the program is treating it as text, or as what we call a string. But I want it to be an actual number. So a string is anything I can type on my keyboard. Numbers, though, and there are multiple different types of numbers we can work with in Python. Numbers are special types of strings, so I want to go and convert it. And I'm only going to be working with whole numbers. Whole numbers we call integers. That means no decimals. So what I want to do is I want to go and convert my input here into a decimal. And this is how I do it. I wrap my input statement with the letters int, which means converted into a decimal, or sorry, converted into an integer, so no decimals, and then I close it off right here. I'll run it again. Please enter your number, 8. 8 is less than 25. The two numbers we're comparing are 8 and 25. 8 is smaller than 25. It works. Now, I realize there's one bit of formatting I didn't like. Right here it says, please enter your number. I want to put in a space here. Please enter your number to compare. I'm going to do colon and a space. So if I run it again, I can see that it puts some breathing room, some space in here. We're comparing 8 and 25. 8 is smaller than 25. Great. And I'll run it one more time. I type in 50, and it tells me we're comparing 50 and 25. 50 is larger than 25. So my program works. So there we go. That is an introduction to working with if statements, allowing us to compare two different things together to determine which statement is true. Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.